You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, F-I-N-A-N-C-E, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, F-I-N-A-N-C-E, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
A purple mountain majesties over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America sweet.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to For Immediate Release. I'm Liz Feld, and it is Monday night, March 25th, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-host Bill O'Reilly, who's just coming off another media appearance. He's much in demand these days with so much going on in the political arena. So welcome, Billy.
I do believe we may have lost Billy. One moment, please.
So hold on, we're not going to welcome Billy yet.
I'm
wait,
so
no,
sorry
there
that I
he
had
is.
you guys on mute.
There
I
he
am so
is.
sorry.
Yeah.
I am right here. How's everything with you tonight?
You're just transitioning from your other medium of network television to radio.
Exactly. One of those nights.
I was just saying you're much in demand given everything that's going on.
With nothing at all to say. It's
nothing.
fascinating.
I'm sure you're keeping your opinions to yourself.
Right, trying to.
Good for you. Good for you.
Boy,
Well,
where do we even start tonight? Where do we start?
Well, what were you talking about for the last hour in New York on television?
Let's see. We talked about Kirsten Gillibrand. We talked about congestion pricing in New York, which is a big issue here, and we talked about. I think we were going to talk about the Mueller probe. I mean, there's just so many things. And what I really wanted to talk about was something you alerted to me first today, which was Michael Avenatti. Could Donald Trump possibly have had a better couple of days?
No, the fact.
I mean,
in fact, he might have wanted to space him out a little bit, given that he was in a drought for good news for such a long time. But my God, it raised the scores for those. Yeah, no kidding. That story is one for the ages, though, and boy, is that a long time coming. I mean, this is we can get into the details on the criminality of it all, but this guy has had it coming to him for quite some time.
Yeah, I just can't believe how brazen he was. You mentioned some of the quotes to me, and other people that were down in the green room where I was were talking about it also, and it sounds pretty cut and dry. And of course, he's claiming he's going to be exonerated, which seems to be the word of the week. But wow, I mean, what an idiot. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be unkind, but what an idiot. I mean, if indeed, I mean, I know it's alleged and the rest of it, but it sounds like they've got pretty good evidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, it takes a lot for the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District to hold a live press conference, listing all the charges, and he has the tape recordings of the extortion or the allegations of extortion against Avenatti. I got to give Nike so much credit here for right out of the gate from the very first threat that Avenatti posed to them. They went right to the U.S. Attorney's office and they framed this. I mean, this all went down in 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. Yep.
So
and I hadn't realized, and you told me about the other attorney. I had not heard his name, and although I know you mentioned that he was on the William Kennedy Smith trial, but I didn't realize he was the Colin Kaepernick attorney, and I wonder if that raises questions about that settlement. Yeah, you got to wonder.
Well, the self-dealing that goes on here, and the self-serving nature of representation here. I mean, Avenatti, I don't cry any tears for Stormy Daniels, believe me. But he uses every single one of these people for his own purposes, and he rakes in a fortune. Although it sounds like he's in debt up to his ears. all kidding aside, we've talked about the cartoon character that he's become. He was single-handedly had probably the biggest influence in the Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, there were many, many senators, largely Senate Democrats, who actually, based on Avenatti's claims and his relentless TV appearances, really wanted to put the brakes on Kavanaugh. And they had other reasons, some of the policy stuff that they were concerned about, but it was really about these claims these women made that Avenatti put forward as fact. And so now there's no question that every single thing that he has said is not only called into question, but has completely been, I think, just rebuked or debunked.
Yeah. I mean, you watch these guys, they come in and they fly so high, and their rhetoric is so hot that it's irresistible to the news media. And, in the end, it's not going to work out well, but his fame, I think, is going to be really short-lived, and he's going to end up in a pretty deep prison cell. That's just what a turn of events. Or maybe he was so jealous that Donald Trump and Bob Mueller were getting all the press for the last couple of days that he just jumped in. He couldn't stand it. I mean, the guy's so media hungry.
Yeah. And I don't know also what his relationship was with Michael Cohen and how that all turned, but he was very early on involved in the Cohen subpoenas and indictment. So anyway,
but what's your take? I'm curious to get your take on the Mueller results. The I don't know, they say no exoneration, but there's nothing going to be there. Huge victory for President Trump. What's your take on how the Democrats should handle this going forward? There seems to be a pause. They seem not to be sure what to do right now. What would you advise? It was a question that was going to be asked of me tonight, and I didn't get a chance to answer it. But I'd love to get your take on it.
I'm not sure that there is any consensus. I think they appear to be acting quite surprised by the outcome. Well, it's not even an outcome yet because there's still more to come. But so there's that one thing. You would think that they would have had some talking points ready to go in the event that this was going to be the case. That doesn't seem to be what it was. I mean, they're on the one hand, there are many of them are trying to declare victory because certainly because the obstruction charge, Mueller was much more vague. So there's that piece. And secondly, I saw Schumer saying, God, well, there were all these other indictments and all these other convictions. And then, half the White House is in jail and on and on. So in that sense, it's victory, almost trying to ignore the fact that this was a complete political vindication for Trump. And it is. I don't know how you can look at it any other way politically.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah. I mean, to me, that was always the thing. And I've never been a huge supporter, but to me, it all came down to Russia. He either did it, meaning the collusion thing, or didn't. And it was clear that, they may have been playing footsie, but they didn't do they didn't do the criminal thing. And so that's the big deal. The rest of it is ancillary at best.
Well, and it's so interesting because, you and I have talked a lot about this issue of what does the collusion really mean? And the president's been saying no collusion for so long, it's almost laughable. But he clearly used that word over and over again, specifically for legal reasons, and right. Not. And that is the word. That is what he was exonerated of. So, and of course, collusion really means treason, which really means a foreign agent. So that being, I think, the most critical of all of these things. No conspiracy, no collusion. Politically, it's interesting. I know many people who are close to the White House who say the bigger sensitivity for him is that even Russian interference without the collusion, Trump didn't want to buy into because then it would delegitimize the election results and on and on and on. And here we are 3 years later, still litigating the election results. It's just good Lord. But I don't know how back to your first question, I don't know how the Democrats played going forward into the because even Beto O'Rourke, as recently as 48 hours ago, was swearing on a stack of Bibles, and he said he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the president was going to be found guilty of collusion. So where do you go from there? How do you walk that back?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think there's so many eggs were in that basket. And I think the Democratic Party is in danger of overplaying the hand. I mean, you could say that they already have. And I'm one person that's eating some crow today because I thought there was going to be something in that report. But, I think there's still cards to be played. But if that's what the candidates go out with, it's going to be thin, or it might backfire. People are just going to be tired of talking about Trump and Mueller and the rest of it. Like Kirsten Gillibrand. Like, how does Senator Gillibrand, the New York senator who formally endorsed her candidacy on Sunday, she announces her candidacy in front of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and calls him. She goes saying he is a coward or whatever it was. Like, how is that like a thing to run on? Like, I mean, come on, you got to be kidding me. And of course, later on Sunday, the word came out that there was nothing at all in the Mueller report, and she ends up looking like an idiot. I mean, I think the Democrats are going to have to find something else, a lot more than what they have right now, because I think this issue vanished on them. I mean, maybe Southern District of New York, indicts people or comes out with its own report, or maybe the Attorney General issues indictments for New York, which it can. But right now, they've got nothing. I mean, they've got nothing other than some very strange candidates.
So the legal issues for the Trump organization are separate, but I think you're right about platforms, and they were hanging everything on this. I saw something today about some focus groups with Obama voters who voted for Trump. It was sort of that was the circle of people in the focus group, and that issues like Medicare for all don't register at all with anybody. People that, like 4 out of 10 of the people in the room didn't even know what Medicare for all meant. Actually, maybe even more of them. So that what are they running on the wall? That they're against the wall. I mean, that's going to be a dead issue by the time next year rolls around. So I think they've really got to be struggling, and it gets back to the issue of the very progressive wing of the party fighting with people like Nancy Pelosi, who is no longer the progressive wing of the party, to try to do something substantive on policy. But what can they do? And my guess is we're going to end up having at least one more Supreme Court fight before the cycle really gets rolling. So we'll have that again, and I think Trump wins hands down. So I think this has got to be a massive reset internally. They can still badmouth Trump all they want, but their big talking point, I think, has been taken away from them completely.
And the cudgel that Trump now has against the news media is going to be very effective. I think it's going to be, because he's been saying which hunt and the rest of it, and bashing the press for 2.5 years now. But now that this Mueller report shows what it does, it's going to be believable. Although I'm sympathetic, maybe not to the extent that it was done, but I'm very sympathetic to the news media, because to me, there was enough smoke where this had to be investigated. I think an investigation was absolutely warranted, and I think Mueller did a fantastic job. And I have a column coming out tomorrow, calling for him to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Probably from the next president, because he did such a good job, no leaks. But I think it had to be investigated, and in that case, the news media had to cover that investigation. But from the political side, Trump is going to be able to point to any attacks from the news media and say, "Are you kidding me? You've got no credibility. Like, you guys again, get lost," and it's going to be effective.
Yes, and it's not the first time it's happened. We've seen it.
That's right.
We've seen this with the media before. So the media piece of this is it is the story in a way, really, because they've driven this story for the last 2.5 years. But the platform they've given people like Adam Schiff to go out and make claims of literally treason, which is as serious a charge as you can make of anyone, of any American, and then of the president of the United States. Where is the accountability there? What do this idea that anyone's going to apologize is laughable. Right. I have a lot of Republicans and, conservatives and members of Congress, calling for the press to say they're sorry. Which have you ever heard of that? Because I've never heard the media say they're sorry.
No.
So what happens there? Are there any consequences to the kind of coverage we've had? Do you think any editorial meetings are going to happen today and tomorrow and the weeks ahead that say, whoa, we got to be more responsible here? I mean, this has driven all this ratings, the ratings for these networks. And by the way, it's the exclusion of covering a lot of other issues that are going on every day in this country and around the world.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've noticed in the last few weeks that CNN has begun to cover other things they used to, like just other stories have been cycling into the news, because for a year and a half, it was just 24 hours a day, Donald Trump and Mueller. I mean, it was just, and I would check in with CNN because I wanted to know, what's the worst thing, the news of the day about Trump, and you could pick it up in 3 minutes at any time of the day or night, because you plug in and they were saying the worst possible things about him, and they began to cycle out of it a little bit. But now that this part is over, I mean, I think they're going to pay a significant price in viewership, even though it's probably mostly liberals that were watching the show. But they invested so much in this, and MSNBC perhaps more so. I can't bear to watch them, but perhaps more so. And I think there's going to be a pretty good backlash. I really do. No apologies, because I don't think the news media should apologize. They're doing their job and running something down. But it just, it's in sympathy to them, it's got to be confounding because there was so much smoke. I mean, there was so much smoke out there. If you go between, Trump killing sanctions against the Russians and later refusing to implement sanctions that were passed almost unanimously by the Congress, you had the meetings, 100 meetings that were denied that ended up taking place. You had the Trump Tower meeting. You had saying nice things about Putin all the time. You had all these things, and there were 4 dozen more of them than that all pointed to what looked like a problem, like something real. And at the end of the day, there was no evidence. And it's, you can almost feel bad for them as much as you want to gloat and say, ha, 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 you got it wrong.
Wow, I can't feel badly for them. But
I knew you were going to feel badly for them.
And try to be respectful of the press. I think that we can certainly agree that this fawning over the likes of Putin and Kim Jong-un, I mean, this is what's so offensive. We put aside meddling, no meddling, interference, collusion. I think that part is confounding and just so offensive. I mean, this last go around with Kim Jong-un, when Trump seemed to almost turn his back on the war beers, I think for a lot of people was what, that was right. About as low as you can go. So that's a surprise. But as you and I have discussed, this is where the president thinks that he's going to be different from other, his predecessors by actually doing deals with people if they make sense for the economy or for national security. He's not going to not sit down with a dictator or a tyrant. I'm surprised he hasn't sat down with Assad, frankly. The bar's so low.
Right.
But it's tough. But I think you're probably right about the ratings, Billy. I think everyone's just had enough, and in the absence of some serious policy stuff coming forward from the Democrats in the primary, I don't know what the horse race is going to be about. And then Trump's going to go about his business. He's going to start acting like a winner again because he has really not been acting like a winner for the last couple of months. He seemed very nervous. Yeah,
he's been off, and that was another thing that pointed to what is he so nervous about? I mean, they were disparaging Mueller and carpet bombing his reputation, where Mueller genuinely has a stellar reputation. He was a Marine Corps officer wounded in Vietnam. I mean, he's got a breast full of medals. He led the FBI honorably, and then was doing his job here, not leaking, none of it, and they were killing his reputation. And it kind of begged the question, why? If there's nothing there, why would they, want to damage Mueller and the investigation so much? And I felt for it too. As you know, I write a column for Newsday once or twice a week, and I would, on one hand, be saying, how could the press be covering nothing but Donald Trump? And the other hand, 2 out of 3 columns that I was doing were on Donald Trump. It was just irresistible. But he's going to get the last laugh, for this cycle at least, and he's going to deserve it. The last laugh, he's going to be entitled to it. We'll see what happens in the long term, but that's probably going to come down after the 2020 election.
I think we might have our guest. Did our guest just join us?
I think so.
Oh, Billy, we have a very special guest tonight on the night before he is deployed for his new career. Matthew Feld.
Matthew Feld. I want to hear all about it.
Yep, and he's got plenty of his own thoughts on the Mueller stuff and on the Democratic primary and everything else. So we're so glad he's here.
And I may ask you about the wisdom of a 3-2 curveball at the same time. Matthew, can you tell us what you're up to now?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm just getting ready to head out to Arizona, where I'll be doing video and player development for the Chicago Cubs. I'll be doing that for the next 6 months. So I'll be doing that throughout the minor league season, and definitely a new phase in terms of what I've been doing in the past as a writer. So I'm looking forward to it. I get started next week, so it should definitely be a lot of fun.
And for those of you who have not heard Matthew Feld before, he is a political savant, and he comes on for immediate release from time to time as the representative of all millennials. And and you've given extraordinary insight and changed my mind on a couple of things. Liz, do you remember the predictions that Matthew made in the before the 2018 races? I think you were like 98-2 or something. It was ridiculous.
He even predicted the recount in Louisiana or Alabama or whatever it was when you and I didn't even know there was a race.
That's right.
Special election. It was a special election.
Yes.
So Matthew, we were talking about I'll ask you the same question that I asked Liz, which is, what do you think the Democrats have to do now that the Mueller probe is done, and that the president, for all intents and purposes, is exonerated in the minds of the public? What do the Democrats now have to do?
Well, I think this is an interesting battle between the way that the media has portrayed aspects of the Democratic Party. I think, people like Adam Schiff that have, stayed in Congress and, of course, have kind of led the way from a talking point standpoint on the Russian investigation, obviously are put into a bit of a bind. Nancy Pelosi, of course, is put into a bit of a bind in terms of how she wants to kind of direct the messaging. But there's also the other members of the Democratic Party who, of course, been on the campaign trail for president: Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand. And if you actually look at the percentages of what they've talked about, they've actually talked about the Russian investigation almost barely at all. In terms of sound bites that you'll see on CBS or CNN, that's the only sound bites you'll hear is Bernie Sanders today calling for the whole damn investigation. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of their campaigns have actually had nothing to do with it, and it's because they've had operatives that have been smart enough to know that this is a possibility. And so, to me, that's going to be the struggle for the Democratic candidates, is to get that message through the media, is that their campaigns are not about the Russia investigation, but in fact, but instead, being against some of the policies of the Trump administration in the last couple of years. So I think as Republicans have had kind of their battle with the media in terms of coverage and the negative viewing of Trump over the last few years, the Democrats have had a problem of their own right, in the fact that you've got people like AOC and Adam Schiff who have made it all about Russia, or have made it all about Trump the person, whereas you've got these Democratic candidates who have actually been on the campaign trail trying to argue over specific policy points. And so I think that's something the Democratic Party is going to have to kind of struggle with and try to grapple over the next couple of years.
And Matthew, how do you explain, and Liz and I spoke about this before, I was down earlier tonight at New York One in New York City, and Mayor de Blasio was the guest on before consultants went on to talk about things. And I certainly wasn't going to bring it up, but the interviewer did, and asked, how can this mayor of South Bend be polling higher than the mayor of New York City with 8.5 million people, South Bend with what, maybe 100,000? How do you explain that? Like, how do you explain that mayor? And I can't even remember his name. I'm blanking on it. Mayor. What do they call him?
Oh, the one that's running for president.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg, is that how you pronounce his last name?
Mayor Pete, right? Mayor Pete, right? That's right. Mayor Pete. I mean, how do you explain Mayor Pete or Beto O'Rourke? Is there something that I'm missing as an old, decrepit man, that as a young, vibrant, millennial, you can see?
Yeah, well, I think the appeal to Beto O'Rourke, in my opinion, is kind of, the typical charismatic, someone who comes off as someone who's in their 20s, even though they're in their 40s. Gets on top of the coffee table. Yeah, gets on top of the coffee table in Iowa and New Hampshire, talks to every voter, answers every single question, comes off as honest, authentic, is willing to kind of go out on a limb, take what appear to be really radical positions. But, Beto O'Rourke has gotten a lot of attention for his thing blew up when he had the Colin Kaepernick answer over the national anthem, and he's talked about the other day getting rid of the Electoral College. And But Beto O'Rourke actually has the most moderate record of any Democrat that's running for president, and it's not even close in terms of what he's voted on while being in the Senate, or being in Congress, I should say. So I think people like O'Rourke's big advantage is he's a really good communicator. He's able to get ideas that appeal to the far left of the base, but then when the primary and general election comes around, he can say, I actually voted for more moderate viewpoints. I think
right.
Mayor Pete's big appeal, so to speak, is that he is this literally small-town grassroots guy, and I think he is someone that for the opposite wing of the Democratic Party that's not Bernie Sanders, he kind of has a very similar appeal, where he had a really good showing in the CNN town hall that he did. I think that got him a ton of really good publicity. I think the fact that he really is this small-town guy that is not this big, billionaire self-funded at a time where the party, of course, is kind of going against, these big Wall Street donors, so to speak, and those candidates. I think that's really where the alert comes from those two, is that there are these kind of people that appeal as these down-to-earth, will answer any question that you have. And I think, again, that's where the media is showing one side of the party, and the party voters are actually not going for what the media is portraying of the party. And so I think there's that kind of interesting back and forth going on.
Matthew, do you think we're reading too much into the influence that AOC is going to have on these candidates and the positions that they take as we get closer to the caucuses and things?
Yeah, I don't think she's going to really have any ability or any real influence from an actual voter's perspective. She might get the most Twitter publicity. She might get the most publicity on CNN and MSNBC because she's, of course, the loudest person that's ever been elected to office. But in terms of her influence overall on the shaping of the Democratic Party platform, 84.5% of Democrat voters still believe in capitalism. Bernie Sanders has been running for president for 6 years now. Everyone knows who he is, and he still can only get 25% in a poll. So to me, the fact that there's very little evidence to me that wing of the Democratic Party has really had been widespread enough over the rest of the party to have a really, really big impact on who gets the nominee. At the end of the day, if Joe Biden wants to run, he's probably going to at very least enter as a front runner. Beto O'Rourke, in some capacity, is going to be in line to either be the nominee or be the vice presidential nominee. And you're talking about two candidates right there that probably will end up combining for at least 50% of the vote, who would not be considered far-left candidates. Again, O'Rourke is one of the most moderate members of the Democratic Party based on what he's voted for, and I don't think any far-left Bernie Sanders person is really hoping that Joe Biden is running. So I think that's kind of the dynamic, is that the crazy, outlandish person gets all the media, but the Democratic Party voters are not voting for it. AOC, I think, is underwater in New York. I think she's like a 31% approval rating here as of last week.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
So I think that's going to be really interesting to see when the primary and caucuses roll around. I think people are going to be pretty surprised when it's actually the more moderate members of the party that are the ones that end up, winning.
I think that's right. Go ahead, Liz.
Oh, Billy, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to ask, when you say people are running on ideas, and you talk about Elizabeth Warren, and she, of course, had a town hall a week ago, and the bean counters added up $100 trillion worth of spending that she came up with.
Yeah.
Does your generation fall for that, or is there some fiscal sense there? I know the weight of the world's bills haven't fallen on you yet, but is there any sense that they're going to? Is that in the conversations that you have?
Well, this gets interesting, right? Because I know we've talked about this a bunch. Is that one party is openly saying that they're going to go out and they're going to blow up the deficit with all the spending programs that they're proposing, and the other party pretends like they're not going to blow up the debt, but they still do it anyway.
Lying to you,
so,
right?
Yeah. Exactly. So would you rather be outwardly lied to or be kind of two-faced against, so to speak? I think that's kind of the battle right now, is that it's something that I care about, but it's something that nobody seems to care about, or at least the candidates that are running have proposed no real solutions to battle. I think something, and again, this gets really, nitty-gritty, but I agree with very few of Elizabeth Warren's overall proposals as it pertains to the Department of Education or the Electoral College or the amount of money that she wants to spend in entitlements without actually doing entitlement reform. But I must say that as a voter, It is incredibly heartwarming that regardless of the fact that I don't agree with her, almost everything that comes out of her mouth is actually like policy related, and it is not like this outlandish, out of nowhere, just like these brazen attacks, personal attacks all the time. I think, again, I don't know how those messages are going to get through because I don't see Elizabeth Warren winning a Democratic nomination, but there is no one that talks more about policy specifics than she does. And again, I think that's where the media has that really kind of overbearing influence.
Yeah. Yep.
I saw her town hall on her CNN town hall last week too. I was actually in a hotel and I watched the whole thing, and she was very, very impressive. I agree with Matthew. On substance, and it's real. She's not just studying, with a miner's lamp under her covers the night before a town hall. She's been living and breathing these issues really for a very long time, and she believes them. I wouldn't vote for her, and I don't agree with her on it. I would say 90%, but I think it's probably more than that. But there's something about her that you have to respect. And I guess it's unfortunate because I think a lot of people tag her with the Hillary policy wonk thing. Oh, she showed up with another 10-point plan about, how to launch a hand grenade. And I think that really doesn't do her justice. I mean, I think she's much more grounded and her experience. And I thought the way she engaged with the audience was very authentic, and it came across that way. But again, she's angry, as I've said a number of times. And I don't think that's a winning message at all. And I don't really see her running as anyone's running as a vice president. But I think it's striking that in every single, we say poll, but they're kind of snapshots of what's going on everywhere, that there isn't a woman or an African-American or a minority at the top of any of the Democratic, in the Democratic Party who's running. You got a combination of Biden and Bernie Sanders and Mayor Pete or Beto O'Rourke every time in the top four. And what does that tell you? We've got Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand and Elizabeth Warren who are nowhere. They're not even a flash, on the screen. And that, given the fact that there's been all of this lip service about white men ruling the Republican Party and ruling the world, I find it more than ironic. I find it quite hypocritical.
Yeah, I thought about that tonight, Liz, when one of the Democratic consultants I was on with said under her breath before the show started, anybody but another white male. And I wanted to come back with exactly what you said and said, well, your party's being led by, by three white males. But I think you're right. I think what it says is that the voters, I mean, maybe you have a certain number of progressives that feel, that is so important, but the voters are going with names, or at least with the sense of stability that they might have. Maybe they sense a Midwestern mayor might be okay for them. Your point, Matthew and Liz, was very good about Elizabeth Warren, and I mean we'll get to that there right away. None of us are voting for her. You know what I mean? We're all on the conservative side. But the fact that she talks in policy is admirable, but it doesn't always work politically. It really doesn't. I'm thinking of a candidate who ran in New York many years ago, who was a Harvard debating champion. He was running against a guy for a local Senate seat or assembly, it's just something local, state seat. And he spoke for about 7 or 8 minutes on some policy, in minute detail, just eloquently, just the whole thing with parenthetical phrases wrapped together and tied up with a ribbon at the end. And the other guy was like, he was like he'd been a mechanic or something before, and he was like, "Hey, get a load of Mr. Harvard." I don't know, where I come from, we just say yes. And the place went wild. The place went crazy. And the debate was over. And it's like, that's got to be very frustrating for people who are policy people who believe in real debate and real policy, that most of America isn't looking for that. Most of America is looking for the person that talks to them, that they can get, that says it plainly. And I guess we see that in Trump, and we see that, to some extent, we saw that in Bernie Sanders also.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a battle of what type of person the Democratic Party voters are going to want. Elizabeth Warren might be 5 or 6 now. Again, I'm a pretty big believer that this point in the race is really dictated by media coverage. Beto and Biden, and especially Bernie Sanders, get way more media coverage than any of the other candidates, and it's not even close. I mean, there was a 50-50 chance that I could have told you that I forgot that Cory Booker was running for president. Right. And it's just because those candidates are never on. And I still think Kamala Harris is going to be a real contender when the nomination process rolls around. She's going to get loads of endorsements.
I do too.
She's going to get a ton of money.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, if Joe Biden runs, which, people think he's going to, he's got all the donors, but if he decided not to, I would never be surprised. And, Joe Biden's going to get in, but there's a lot of evidence that his numbers, despite being in first place, are incredibly soft. They're more because of people know who he is than that they're actually going to vote for him. There's a lot of blowback to his candidacy because he's incredibly, he's 78 years old. He was part of the Obama administration. People are going to go after him for the Anita Hill and the crime bill that he voted for. There's no question about it. And so if for some reason he doesn't run or he doesn't end up being the strong candidate that people think he's going to be, well, I mean, if I'm Beto O'Rourke and I'm going up against Elizabeth Warren in a debate, or even Bernie Sanders, if it's the three of them in a debate, I'm Elizabeth Warren, and I can say to the two of them, we're all fighting for the same economic proposals, but I'm the only one that actually fought for it. I'm the one that got the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. I'm the one that sat on the Senate Finance Committee. I'm the one that actually stood up for the people that, were the Wall Street protests. Now I'm forgetting who they were. But
Occupy Wall Street, right? Yep.
The Occupy Wall Street. She's the one that was out there on the street fighting with them. So she's the one that can actually look at Bernie Sanders and Beto O'Rourke in the eye and say, you guys keep campaigning on these things, but you guys have never done anything about them, but I have. And I think that message is going to resonate with voters. If she's on the debate stage with them and look at them, and you've got this, left, this populist, sector of the left-wing Democratic Party, she's going to be able to look at the two of them and say, you guys are just all talk, and I've actually done it before. On top of the fact that she's a woman candidate, I think she will end up being an incredibly appealing candidate, especially in the Northeast and in the Southeast when the primaries roll around. And I think she's someone that could definitely end up being a real contender.
I agree, and she's not going to be frightening to law and order Americans. Because she's been an attorney general, she's had that background.
You an attorney?
No, not at all.
Yeah. No, but Matthew, I hear you completely on that because she really has walked the walk. But where does that leave us with the Democrats being, beating Trump as their number one priority, electability as a candidate? Do you think that she's really going to be able to pass that threshold?
Yeah, I think electability kind of got thrown out the window a couple of years ago. I think that's kind of over. In terms of, I think it's incredibly important for people that are voting, but in terms of who do I think can beat Trump? I mean, I don't even know. I think it's impossible to play that type of game, to be quite honest.
I've got to ask a dumb question. Were we talking about Kamala Harris or about Elizabeth Warren here?
Elizabeth Warren. Well, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry. I missed her. I thought you were talking about Kamala Harris again.
Right.
Okay.
Who was definitely Attorney General. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
She's
Yep.
very good in the debate.
I don't think Elizabeth Warren's electable. I don't think she is.
I don't.
Yeah. I mean, maybe she's not. I mean, she might definitely not be. I mean, she's obviously incredibly unpopular. She's definitely not going to be voted on by definitely at least half the population. But
she comes across to me as like Mary Hartman. I mean, there's something about her that's just, I don't know, it goes right up my spine.
And there's been so much talk the last couple of days about, there was this secret meeting that Joe Biden and Stacey Abrams had in terms of like this president, vice president, like we're going to launch together as a ticket. I think Stacey Abrams would be an incredibly formidable general election candidate and primary, if she were to enter the primary on her own right. I mean, she's no different than Beto O'Rourke and how he performed in Texas and she did in Georgia, particularly with the way that election, that kind of campaign ended. In fact, she's African-American. She's a woman. She's certainly did not pull any punches throughout those debates that they had in the Georgia governor's race. And she's incredibly charismatic. And so to me, if she were to get in the race, or be potentially available, I guess, as a vice presidential candidate, I think she is an incredible wild card that could definitely end up being a major player in the Democratic nomination process.
Well, I tell you, I find it really fascinating that there are no governors in this race at all. I mean, governors were always the most appealing, and candidates because they'd done something. They'd been chief executives. They had track records to run on. They did everything from balance to, a budget to manage the police force, to on and on. And I think you look at 6 senators running and think, for God's sakes, Congress is a mess. Why would I expect that any of these people could be the chief executive officer of the United States? I don't know what the standard is anymore, frankly. I think maybe it's gone out the window. But am I missing something? I don't think there's one governor running.
Well, John Hickenlooper is running, the former governor of Colorado.
He can't even admit, he's not sure if he's a socialist or a capitalist. He couldn't even answer the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is, though, I mean, there hasn't been a governor or the nominee for president. Well, there's only been one since 2000, and Mitt Romney. So Obama, of course, was a senator. McCain was a senator. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were their own people. And for the Democrats, in terms, they're just, quite frankly, the fact of the matter is they haven't had a lot of state houses. So there hasn't been a lot of governors that can run for president.
That's a very good point. That's right.
Gavin Newsom, already endorsed Kamala Harris. I think the Washington governor, I forget his name, Jay Inslee, is that his name, is running for president just to push the climate change platform. So, there's just honestly not a lot of Democratic candidates. There's none from the swing states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan that can really run right now and kind of be a formidable contender for the nomination, because there weren't any Democratic governors until this most recent midterm election.
And Matthew, what's your sense? I mean, you have your generation more than any other that's preceded you is members of your generation are registering more as independents than has ever been seen before. Then more Democratic than Republican. Republicans are obviously taking a beating with your generation right now, but more and more of millennials are independents. Do you think that bodes well for Schultz, or do you think that he's almost going to be immaterial in the race?
Yeah, I think. Well, this gets complicated. I've never really believed in independent voters, to be perfectly honest. I think.
Actually, a lot of very smart people that I know. I'll do a shout out to Bobby from Virginia right now. I totally agree with you. There's no such thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people register as independent to feel good about themselves and act like they have their own moral compass, when in fact they actually just vote for the same party that they just voted for before. And I think it's incredibly backed up by data as well. After the 2008 election, the Republicans lost a ton of registered voters that became independents. But when the 2010 midterms rolled around, those independents all once again voted for the Republican Party. They were just now independent. So I think that gets very deceiving. I think a lot of millennials might be registering as independent because they are technically in favor of the Democratic Party. In terms, yes, they might be. A lot of these. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say that was the math that we always did in races, and we used to do a lot of races in New York City, and we won 22 races over a bunch of years, and it's a pretty heavy Democratic territory. And our basic math that I would do, rule of thumb, was that if independents plus Republicans equaled somewhere around 50%, we could win. The independents to me were closet Republicans.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree. And I don't know if it's because they disagree with the Republicans on a social platform in terms of abortion, gay marriage, from that, gun rights, things like that, or if it's because you have some millennials now that actually are more leaning to the left, but don't agree with the corporate aspect of the Democratic Party. And I think that's really where there's a lot of kind of hesitancy amongst my generation, is you got a lot of people that are for, climate reform, gay marriage, gun control, go down the line, gender equality. So I think that, but they disagree with the Hillary Clinton and the Joe Biden and the invasive foreign policy aspect of the party. So I think there's a lot of people that kind of struggle with that. There's a lot of people that are have a lot of discontent for both parties, but the fact of the matter is, on Election Day, 90% of Republicans are going to vote for Donald Trump, 90% of Democrats are going to vote for Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or whoever it is, and it's all about the 10% in the middle that decide not to vote for Jill Stein. That's usually the way it works.
And how much of it, too, is that people just don't want to have to defend a party right now? So it's part of it's a cool factor, like, oh, God, I would never admit I'm an X or a Y. But, because they find themselves around the Thanksgiving dinner table, and it's so much easier to say, well, I'm an independent. Like, I'm Switzerland here. I don't own any of the baggage that comes with these parties. I think that's part of it. But Matthew, until you brought up Howard Schultz a minute ago, I'd completely forgotten that he was even in the race.
I think Howard Schultz is hated by just about everyone. I think
he's finding out how hard it is to stay in the news as an independent. I mean, it's really a table set too, and that's how the media has it set up. Not in any pernicious way. It's just that that's how it's set up. It's the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's going to get harder as debates go on. It's going to be Howard who, unless he's willing to spend literally billions of dollars to force himself into the conversation. So it's going to be. But if ever there were a time, it would be now for that independent. I mean, Perot caught on, and he caught on for a good while, and he was leading in the polls. But I don't think Schultz is Perot.
Well, you know what else? Because I think Ross Perot knew what he stood for something, and everyone knew what he stood for. And I think sometimes people mistake being an independent for not really standing for anything in particular. It's I'm a good negotiator. I can work with both sides of the aisle. I can do this and that. Ross Perot was very clear where he stood on the budget, on the deficit, on all that stuff, and he just happened to be an independent.
Yeah. And then, you know what's so funny is go ahead, Matthew. I'm sorry.
No. I was going to say, look at Michael Bloomberg. You can't have more monetary resources than that guy has. He's got more money, more wealth, more properties than just about any possible presidential candidate. He has thought about running for president like 36 times and never has, and it's because he's come out and said multiple times there's no pathway for me as an independent to win. So, I think that's the big thing is that if you're him, if you're a potential independent candidate and someone with like $3 billion worth of wealth can't potentially, go up and present a formidable independent challenge, then why should I?
Yeah, and Bloomberg had $50 billion, and he also had the best pollsters in the country, or some of them, and you're right, they couldn't find a path. What I find interesting is that nobody in politics, even on the Republican side, and Chris Christie did it a little bit, not my favorite character, but he did it a little bit in 2016. But no one on the Republican side talks about debt and the fiscal issues, and that's what drove Perot to the top of the heap. That's what he talked about debt and fiscal problems, looming issues, and that's when the federal debt was minuscule in comparison to what it is today. And he got to. I remember when he was at 34% in the polls, and I know you do, Liz. And he ended up at 19, but he actually led in the three-way race between Bush, Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot, and his whole message was economic, and yet no one's touching it today.
Yeah, and I just think it's unfortunately because the issue's been kicked down the road so many times that there's really just no interest amongst the voters, or really interest amongst the candidates, of course, because candidates feed the voters and the voters feed the information back to them of what they want to hear. No real appetite for it. I think there's just so many other issues that voters care about more, whether on the Republican side, it's with regards to immigration or tax reform. On the Democratic side,
they don't believe it.
Climate change, or they don't believe it. Right. Well, that's the thing to me that's hilarious is that the Democrats, when they were in power, were asked about it, and of course they have they're providing resources, government resources. They're doing X, Y, and Z. They want to increase taxes in order to recreate the revenue. And now the Republicans are in office, and was it Lamar Alexander or Mitch McConnell that was asked a couple months ago about it, and they were like, "We're not worried about it at the moment." Like, well, you were 4 years ago, so I don't really know what happened. So, whoever's not in power always wants to cut spending, and whoever's in power always wants to spend money. So that's unfortunately the way it seems to work, and it's because you can't. There's not 10 senators that are willing to get into a room, hash out a deal, and bring it back to their constituents with any kind of faith. Because at the end of the day, it's really unfortunate. It comes down back to this, but it's all about getting reelected. And
what you have to have a president. You have to have a president that will say, "I will and mean it. I will veto everything until we get this. Nothing gets passed until we get this." That's what it's going to have to come to. I think we just broke a record for a quarter. For history, we've never run up such a deficit in a single fiscal quarter than we did. I think it was $252 or $62 billion in a quarter, and it's madness.
Yeah, it's impressive to have job and economic growth while having a rising deficit, because theoretically the way it's supposed to work is that the increased economic growth and the increased jobs, and hopefully, even though it really hasn't happened recently, increased wages turns into increased revenue for the government through the more taxes that you're paying. And that just it hasn't happened because the spending levels, whether it be on defense or education or entitlements, have gone such a high level that it's really become irrelevant what the economic growth is as it pertains to the overall debt deficit on a year-to-year basis.
And even the Keynesians just want to spend when there's recessions, and it's like, you know, even they would be cautious about spending the way we are now. But nothing applies. It's as though the credit card is on the bar, the tab is open, and nobody wants to stop the party. You know, you just don't want to look at that bill.
No, and I don't know what happens, because people think this is just going to go on forever, but at some time, was it supposed to be 2027 that Social Security Trust Fund is going to run out? At some point, our debt to GDP ratio will reach an unsustainable point where we'll no longer be able to foot the basic credit card bills. And when, the interest companies call and ask for their money and it's not provided, I'm very interested to see what step 2 of that conversation is going to be.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I think it's 2023 or 2025 where the interest on the debt, and those years are suddenly, very foreseeable. Those are tomorrow, 2023, 2025. I forgot which year it was, but in 2023 or 2025, just the interest alone on the federal debt, and that doesn't include unfunded liabilities like payments that aren't accounted for. Just the federal debt, the interest will be larger than the U.S. military budget every year. To me, that's staggering.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. And again, you just have to it's all about, as you said, Billy, it's just about a president who says, I will veto this, or I will veto every bill until we reach the point where we're on track for a balanced budget. And that means Republicans, you have to be willing to give some defense spending, and Democrats, you have to be willing to be able to be open to entitlement reform, whether it's savings accounts, raising the retirement age, reducing benefits up to a certain age. You could
do a means test. It's not going to be popular, but you could do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's
if you retire with $10 million, maybe you don't need it.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Not one of these issues is going to be on the agenda in any debate or on the election, or up for discussion in the next in this presidential election. It used to be you had to come forward with your deficit reduction plan, even if you weren't going to be able to get it done. What your positions were on entitlement reform. Should we raise the Social Security age? Should we raise should we do means testing? People don't ask. People don't even know what that is anymore. It's the issues are where do you stand on the wall, right? Where do you stand on immigration? Where do you stand on legalizing marijuana? Where do you stand on? And not this other stuff that really is what's bringing this country to its knees. And you talk about national security, this should be the first thing we talk about is our financial security.
Liz, I'm wondering, I think the last time we had a serious conversation about Social Security was when President George W. Bush was proposing that 5% of the fund for Social Security be invested in the private sector. And remember, he's privatizing Social Security and that kind of stuff. I wonder if anyone's figured out, had we put 5% of that money in the market, where that would be now. I bet it would be a pretty good sum that would have accumulated.
Remember,
because the market exploded after that.
Oh my God! It was about him gambling with grandma's money and grandma going off a cliff, and oh my God!
5% of it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, you're gonna have candidates. At least, again, they're gonna have views that I disagree with on how to get there. But you're going to have candidates in Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar who are going to put deficit reduction plans on the table that in their mind is going to get there. Of course, it's going to be about raising taxes on the top 5% of wealth earners, cutting spending in areas like defense and overseas military. But my greater concern on that conversation, quite frankly, is who's going to be the Republican nominee, because there's been nothing for me to believe that when it comes to a presidential debate between those two, whoever it may be, that the president is going to respond with a very well thought out answer on how to decrease the debt.
No, that's right.
The only thing I've ever seen on that topic, the only time I've seen the president actually say that he regrets something was he regretted voting for the omnibus bill, which I'm not sure he does regret it. He just says that politically because he knows it was a bust. he actually may say that and think that's how he's going to answer that whole question. Well, the Congress made me do it, and I shouldn't have done it, and I'm never going to do that again. That will be his policy position.
And I mean, to his credit, he didn't promise going into the presidency that he was going to address these issues. He never touched spending, which was one of the reasons why I didn't support him. Was he never talked about it? He said, "I'll protect Social Security, I'll protect Medicare." He didn't touch it, and so, he's not on the hook for it, politically, but as a leader, he is. And so, yeah, Matthew, it'd be interesting to hear what he says. The Democrats always come in and say, "Oh, we're going to do They're trying to convince you that guaranteed minimum income is somehow going to be a deficit reducer. We'll give away free college, and through our math and our scientists at the University of Minnesota, we figured out that the country's going to save money on this. It's like, guess how much I saved today, from sales,
Yeah. Well, no, you're right, Bill. And he never
promised. Guess how much I saved, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, as you said, he never promised deficit reduction on the campaign trail. A big thing with him, ironically enough, was that he was going to maintain Social Security, so that was not an attacking point for Democrats during the general election because he agreed with them on the talking point. And so to me, no, I totally agree with you, is that you've got the one party that kind of just wants to somehow spend our way back to a balanced budget, and you've got the other party who doesn't feel comfortable approaching the issue.
Right. Which leaves us with a very good song. Matthew Phelps, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Liz.
I'm talking about America, sweet America. God